1 year ago, I was involved in a near-fatal collision. The accident was not my fault, but I'd like to think that even if it had been, I'd be sharing this story with you, because we're all only human. And reminding myself of that has been helping me get through this. August of 2013 was looking like it was gonna be a spectacular month. First, I bought a brand new 2013 Subaru WRX. Over the last 6 years, I've gotten seat time in a variety of vehicles on every type of terrain possible, and I've developed a deep appreciation for every driving surface. But there's something I find feverishly fun about mixed terrain and a car that can find its grip in any weather. Were I to compete in a rally, I'd choose an STI. But as a daily driver, the WRX has all the characteristics I look for in a car. As if that weren't enough, 2 weeks after I bought my precious new car, I flew to Germany to tackle a couple big bucket list items. Starting at the Nürburgring, a track so epic it feels sacrilegious to spell its name without the umlaut. Like any enthusiast, I've long dreamed of tackling the green hell and doing it in an iconic car. Like, say, a 2000 Porsche 911 996 GT3. I was warned about its tricky gearbox and its demanding clutch, but the 996 and I got along famously, and I enjoyed every gear change and every one of those 70-plus turns. I would have liked to have spent a full week at the ring, but the next day, I woke at 4 a.m. and headed 6 hours southeast to meet Bjorn Merrick from App Sportsline and to drive the App Audi R8 GTR. Have you seen this car? If you've seen images of this car, you will understand why I was beyond enthused to get my hands on it. First things first, it's a visually stunning $500,000 prototype. And it's also one of the fastest R8s on Earth, thanks to App's engineers, who increased the horsepower from 525 to 620 and used carbon fiber to drop 220 pounds of weight. It can reach a top speed of 202 miles per hour, and every inch of it is gorgeous. When I arrived at the location, Bjorn showed me all the changes App had made, and then we said goodbye to my video crew so that I could go get familiarized with the car. Everything was going absolutely beautifully. It was gonna be such a good video. I even said that to Bjorn. We were just having a famously great time together, really feeding off each other's energy and enthusiasm for this amazing machine. And everything was going perfectly. Until our final mile, when we were reminded of the gruesome reality that anyone can do anything at any time. I was in the left lane where quickly moving traffic belongs. There was a car in the right lane moving at a much slower pace where more slowly moving traffic belongs. And all we had to do was stay in our respective lanes. I did my part, but unfortunately the other driver did not at all do his. I would say that he cut our line, but that would imply he was driving at a somewhat comparable or acceptable speed to overtake us or nearly overtake us. That was not at all the case. Instead, at the last possible moment and traveling at maybe a third of our speed, he careened out into our lane, essentially turning his car into a brick wall that we could not avoid. I remember Bjorn shouted or screamed something. I don't even think it was words, just some kind of guttural, fearful expression. And I hard braked like our lives depended on it, because they did. Okay, this is where it gets rough. So, at the moment of impact, oh, hang on. The moment of impact was a nightmarish explosion that I have relived more times than I can count, and I am still pretty deeply haunted by the sounds and the smells and the inertia. Despite the impact, we did not roll, though the other car certainly did. But we coasted for what felt like a very long time, and before we even came to a stop, our car was already on fire. I knew I was seriously injured, because there was pain radiating from my leg in a way I will not even try to describe. I immediately began saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," and Bjorn shouted, "We're on fire," and our engine was engulfed in flames that I could hear and smell and feel, but I was so focused on my leg. I tried to move it. I saw it fall in so many different directions. And worse than that was that several bones had broken out through the skin. Because we were on fire, though, we needed to get the hell out of the car. So we both just began unbuckling our belts and reaching for our doors. And thank God for that incredible roll cage, because each of our doors opened within seconds. Without hesitation, I threw myself out of the car, and the moment I hit the ground, I started crawling with my elbows. And it never stopped for even a second until a woman appeared and picked me up and started running. When we'd reached a safe distance from the car, she laid me down on the road, where I began praying to the universe. I could hear people shouting in German and felt more afraid than I have ever been in my life. I didn't know if they could fix my leg, and I was terrified by the thought of losing it. When the medevac arrived, the paramedics put needles in both arms, began administering morphine, and then cut off my right shoe, cut open my right pant leg, and secured a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. They made a splint then for my leg. One began treating an injury on my neck, while another began pressing on my internal organs, and that was really the first time it occurred to me that I very likely had more than one serious injury. Then they loaded me into the medevac, and after what felt like a very long time, we landed at the hospital. I was rushed into a fluorescently lit operating room and quickly surrounded by strangers in surgical masks. There were two doctors down at my feet who at the same time began cutting off my clothes, both legs at a time, which I never knew it happened like that. And I remember thinking in this deeply serious way that this was total bullshit, that if you end up in this room and in this scenario, you are not supposed to be awake. And I had just never so desperately wished that I wasn't. In addition to having trouble speaking, I was also up against a big language barrier, because although I'd learned some German words and phrases prior to my trip, "do not cut off my leg" was not one of them. So I gestured and begged as best I could and prayed I wouldn't awake without it. Because I was conscious, the law required that I sign forms before my surgery, but I had no fine motor skills. I couldn't even hold the pen, let alone write my name. And the last thing I remember before being anesthetized was the surgeon holding my hand around the pen and dragging my arm across the page. I have no idea how many hours or days later I woke up in the intensive care unit, but when I woke up, my chest was covered in electrodes, and my arms and my hands were covered in needles, and I felt pain everywhere. My tibia had been broken in half, and both parts had broken through the skin, and I had a comminuted fracture of the fibula. So the German surgeons implanted a titanium rod through my tibia and secured it with 3 screws, and did what they could to line up the pieces of fibula. I also damaged my patella and meniscus, had a severe concussion, rib contusions, whiplash, and lacerations. I was bleeding internally, and I damaged quite a few major organs. But the most serious injury I sustained was a traumatic dissection of my left internal carotid artery, one of the only arteries that transports blood to the brain and which is responsible for the pulse you feel on the side of your neck. Severing this artery can kill you or cause life-threatening blood clots, and it's the most common cause of stroke in young adults. I stayed in intensive care for, I think, 3 days, and was moved to a hospital room just in time for my family's arrival. I really don't want to talk much about the hellish weeks I spent in the hospital, but suffice it to say, they were among the worst weeks of my life. I was attached to a morphine pump and half a dozen IVs. I spent each day undergoing countless tests and scans and medical procedures, and I was in more pain than I knew how to process. When I got back to the States at the end of September, my life became an endless succession of doctor's appointments, and every day revolved around pain management. I woke up crying every day, pretty much just wanted to be asleep, because even the heavy opiate meds didn't bring me much relief. I've never experienced pain of that magnitude that lasted for so long. Much like September, October through December were pretty horrifying. I was bedridden, unable to do anything for myself, and my pain didn't let up at all. The worst part was, I still needed another major reconstructive surgery on my fibula. On December 30th, I learned I'd be having surgery on New Year's Eve. But by this time, the broken pieces of fibula had improperly fused together, and my surgeon was gonna have to re-break them all before he could realign them and secure them with what would be my second titanium rod. Everyone kept telling me, this will be nothing like the first thing you went through. It's gonna be a lot easier. But when I awoke in the recovery room, the pain I felt, it kind of paralleled the pain I felt in my leg after the accident occurred, and I felt like I was back at the starting line of my recovery, despite that I was 4 months in. So January and February were a lot like September through December. Constant pain, lots of crying, wheelchair bound, bed bound, and alone. By mid-March, they took off my final cast, put me in a boot, and granted me permission to weight bear, which I was ecstatic about. But after 7 months of immobility, I had severe atrophy, and I couldn't even move, let alone lift my leg. I couldn't wiggle my toes. Everything I asked it to do, it would not respond. Physical therapy was incredibly frustrating. I've cried at many sessions. I will be going to physical therapy for years to come, and I still cry sometimes because it's painful and also because it's so frustrating. I have always been an incredibly active person. I played pretty much every sport. I was an equestrian since I was 6 or 7. I was on the swim team. I was a barrel racer. I played softball, basketball, baseball, volleyball. I love mountain climbing. I practice jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai. I love mixed martial arts, Aikido, kickboxing, you name it. And I don't really know how many of those physical skill sets I'll be able to regain, but I'm gonna do my damnedest to get each and every one back. Yet at the same time, there are some sincere limitations that I will not be able to fight and that I'm learning to accept. After 2 surgeries, 7 incisions, 100 stitches, 2 rods, 3 screws, and a knee that now faces west, it's possible I might not ever be able to heel-toe rev match. Or at least I won't be able to without a custom pedal. I've been practicing on my iRacing pedals since my cast was removed. And it's just a constant struggle to build up the muscle, to push through the pain, to regain use of my leg, to walk again. I've only been back at work and driving for a couple months, and it is great to be back. But in a couple weeks, I have to have a 3rd surgery on my leg. And while that breaks my heart a bit, I'm really glad I got to spend a half a dozen weeks doing what I truly love again. Like driving this 1969 Camaro Z28 from the original Trans Am series. Despite how awful this whole ordeal has been, my job allows me not only to drive incredible supercars, but to be myself, indulge my passions, and to share it all with you. So when people ask me how I broke my leg, I tell them in one of the best ways possible.